Hello. All right. Well, thank you all for attending our webinar today on Microsoft Dynamics GP 2013 R2. We're going to be looking at all the new features that have come out in R2. I say all features. There are quite a few. We're going to look at probably the key ones. There's some other little ones in there that we probably will not get to today. I'm Dave Feenstra. I'm a senior consultant for Maynard Costerisan. So first off, I just wanted to show the GP's roadmap. Those of you who have been using GP for a while know that upgrades and new versions of GP over time have tended to take a couple of years to come out. Microsoft has put out service packs and whatnot for the various versions, but they have a new emphasis on being sure to roll out new features and add value for their customers. And we're starting to see that with the introduction of GP 2013. The period of time between the release of GP 2010 and 2013 was actually 2.5 years. But Microsoft has decided to go to a 6-month rollout feature where it's not necessarily new versions, complete new versions, but it does have new features with it. We see that in GP 2013, which came out last year. And in the first half of 2013, they released Service Pack 1. And in the second half of 2013, they released Service Pack 2, which had additional functionality, additional changes to the web client. And now we're seeing in the first half of 2014, they have released the R2 version of GP 2013, which added quite a bit of new functionality along with a built-in workflow functionality. They're also going to be looking at companion apps that will be tied directly into GP, and also looking at apps that are going to be tying GP into Office 365. We can see from the calendar that we are expecting the release of GP 2015. They say second half of 2014, but that will probably end up being late December, early January of 2015 when the next version comes out. With that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the new features that were released with the R2 build. Again, R2 came out, I think it was the last day of June when that finally came out. So we've converted a few clients to it. It has some very neat features, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So what I'm going to be doing is looking at various groupings of the features. So the first thing I wanted to look at were some of the changes that Microsoft made to the GP system as a whole. And the first one that I wanted to look at was the user interface. With GP 2013, the initial release, there was a lot of focus and a lot of emphasis put on the web client version. We're not going to be looking at the web client today. The ribbons were being used substantially in the web client. And what that does, it really cleans up the user interface in GP. And what they've done now with R2 is they've moved that ribbon interface down to the desktop client. And you can see from the slide there, we've got the various ribbons across the top. For those of you who still like the old menu option, that is an option. You can have the ribbons turned on a user by user basis. And also all of the desktop fonts have been modified to use a consistent font throughout the entire application. Another feature that they have added for the system is the ability to take companies offline. What the offline process allows you to do is for system administrators to do maintenance items on the database. Maybe they want to take it offline to run backups, or maybe someone is going to do a year-end close and just needs to make sure everybody is out of that particular company. What we can do is take that company offline, and we can message anybody that is in the company at the time and ask them to log off at a certain time, or tell them when it will be taken offline. Previously, when maintenance needed to be done on a particular company in GP, you were generally on the phone calling all the users and informing them to either log off or make sure they were out by a certain time. The new automated process will allow the administrator to advise people to get out, and once everybody is logged out, the only person that can log back into that company would be the system administrator. Another addition that they had was in SmartList Designer. For those of you who did upgrade to GP 2013, you'll notice that in SmartList they did add additional functionality. They made the SmartList Designer, which allows you to modify existing smart lists and also create your own smart lists from a very basic standpoint. I mean, it's not a replacement for the SmartList Builder module, but it does allow users to modify existing smart lists. What they've done with R2 is now added the ability to add the go-to options. And the go-tos are when you're in a smart list and you double-click on a particular line, an action happens. It either opens a form in GP, it goes to another smart list, we can make it go out to a web page, and now with SmartList Designer we have the ability to build our own go-to options in our custom-built smart lists. It is a nice feature. It just allows for more navigation possibilities within the application. Right. Also, one of the features that was released with GP 2013 was the idea of the document attach function. And document attach was a new method that Microsoft implemented in order to allow easier ways of attaching Word documents, Excel documents, PDF documents, any of those, any document for that matter, to particular transactions. With the initial release of GP 2013, that document attach function was available for customers, vendors, sales orders, and purchase orders. Even though they had released that functionality, the idea of using the what's called OLI notes, the object linked embedded notes, was still present in GP. With 2013 R2, they are going to do away with the OLI notes process. There is a utility that they are going to look at, and that's going to be our next slide, that is going to convert any of the OLI notes that you're using into document attach functions. Another item that they've done with document attach is modified it to be included on payables transactions as well as some of the other key fields or key record items within GP. And again, another one of the features that they've done with document attach is they've added the ability to scan documents directly into any document that's open. So we can open the document attach, and you'll notice at the bottom there's a scan button, and if your computer is attached to a scanner, the scan button will light up, otherwise it will be grayed out. But you can then scan that document and it will automatically attach to the document that's open. And then finally, they did include an OLI object migration utility. So if you were a heavy user of the OLI notes and attaching spreadsheets, PDFs, other items to your documents using the OLI notes function, there is the ability now to run a utility that will scan the database for any of the notes that you have out there, any documents that are attached, and it will automatically convert them into the document attach functions within GP. Another feature that they've added, any report can now be sent in Word format. With GP 2013, and I think in the later release of GP 2010, they did add the ability of emailing sales order documents, purchase order documents as Word templates. They have now opened that up to be with any document within GP can now be emailed in a Word template format. And then another feature is the ability of attaching SQL Reporting Services reports to the transaction windows. With the release of GP 2013, this function was added, and it was available for master records only. It was on customer records, vendor records, and I believe the employee master as well. With 2013 R2, we can now hook custom SQL Reporting Services reports to any of our transaction windows. That would come in particularly handy with the sales transaction entry screen, where you might have a custom form written in SQL reporting services that you would want to generate for a particular invoice. So we can hook that report to the transaction screen and run it at any time. You can also add any inquiry screens or any inquiry reports that you may want to use. You can see on the screenshot there they have current balance, customer information, sales per month, other reports that you can run directly from a transaction entry screen. Another feature that they've added is with Microsoft Azure. For those of you who are not familiar with Azure, it is an online virtual server site that Microsoft has put up that allows anybody to essentially build their own hosted environment. Instead of buying a brand new server, you can essentially rent a server from Microsoft and have it function just like any other server that you would be located on premise. In addition, various other options as well. You can build various web servers and other things in Azure. One of the things that they've added into GP is the ability for you to set up an Azure site and then automatically run your backups directly to essentially a cloud-based storage solution. The advantage of this is it takes the onus off of the IT department for maintaining your backups, making sure that they're written to tape, that they're taken off site. You know just by the fact that it was backed up to Azure that it is off site, it is safe, and it is secure. So this is a nice feature, and again, it is leveraging the Azure utility that Microsoft has been building out for the last several years. Okay, with that, I'm going to switch over to GP, and we're going to take a look at a few of these features. Okay, so the first one that we looked at were the ribbons in the desktop, and you can see right away there's a little bit of a difference in all of the screens in GP. They all have the ribbon layout in the top with the full icons. Also, any buttons that were at the bottom of the transaction screens, I'm going to go to our transaction entry. Any buttons that were at the bottom of the screens are also now available from the top, and it just makes for a much cleaner interface in GP. Now, in your user preferences, under Tools and User Preferences, you do have the ability of switching the interface from the action pane. The action pane strip is essentially the same as the ribbon, except it takes the icons off. Or you can go back to the standard menu bar that has been in GP for some time. So if you're familiar with that, you can always put it back to the menu bar. If you want the updated interface, you can switch it over to the action pane. Following an upgrade to GP 2013 R2, all users are automatically set to the action pane, and you can come back into the user preferences and set it back to whatever option you'd like to go forward with. Next feature was taking the company offline, and that's going to be under the utilities, under administration, under utilities, and take the company offline. Now, in my install of Dynamics GP, I only have one company, so I could take it offline, and I would just need to make sure that I have identified myself as the company administrator so that I can log in, and any other users that would be in there, I can put in a message. I can either use the default message, or I can put in a custom message advising my users what time they need to be off, or if I want them off immediately. Since I want to continue on with my demo, I will not take my company offline. Okay, the next feature we talked about was the new SmartList Designer. I'll take just a couple of minutes to also look at some of the new features that were just added to SmartList as part of GP 2013. You'll see at the top we do have the ribbon layout, and in addition we all have the same SmartList that we've always had, So I'll just go to the accounts. But you see, now I also have the ability of taking the sidebar, and I can collapse that in order to get more screen space on my screen. And I can go full screen with the SmartList. In previous versions of GP, we always had that bar on the side taking up some of our screen real estate. We now have the ability of collapsing that, or I can right-click on that sidebar and I can increase it or I can decrease it as I see fit. With the initial release of GP 2013, they had added the SmartList Designer option, which lets me take an existing SmartList. So I'm just going to, again, I'm going to grab my SmartLists, and I can hit New. And since I had an existing SmartList selected, it is now going to build a new SmartList based on the criteria of my old SmartList. So I'm just going to call this one New Accounts, or New Account List. And I can make any other changes to this as I see fit. I can add additional tables and relationships to it. And I can also preview my query down at the bottom just to make sure that I'm getting the results that I anticipated. And one of the new features with GP 2013 R2 is the ability of creating the go-to up here. So on the account listing, you'll see I have a list of my pre-built existing go-tos that are there by default, but I can also add the ability of going to a GP Smart List. I can go over to a navigation list, or I can open a web page. So if I wanted to open a GP Smart List, I'm going to open my Account Transactions Smart List, and my series, I'm going to say is going to be my account transactions, and it's going to be visible to everybody, essentially. And I could pick a particular favorite if I wanted to add that in there as well. In this case, I'm just going to have it open the default, and I'm going to save that. We'll hit OK and OK. And now my Smart List is going to refresh, and you'll see I have my new account list down here. Again, it's just showing me the same items here, but if I go up to my go-to, I have the option of automatically jumping over to my account transactions Smart List. Just adding one additional feature to the SmartList Designer tool. Next function I wanted to look at was the new document attach functions. Document attach, again, was a new concept that Microsoft introduced with GP 2013, and what it allows you to do is look at attaching documents. I'm just going to open an existing sales invoice here. And previously to the document attach function, we would have to use the notes function here and go in through the OLE notes, those who have the paperclip here, in order to add things. That paperclip now automatically opens the document attach function within GP. That same screen can be opened just by the attach screen up on the ribbon now as well. Okay, that document attach function, in addition to being able to just attach things, you'll see it on my screen. I do not have a scanner installed, so the scan button on my screen is grayed out. But if I did have a scanner, that would be available, and I would be able to just, once I have this open, hit scan, and whatever I run through my scanner is automatically going to attach as a new document on this document that I have open. Okay. The other tool that Microsoft provided was the migration utility for the OLE notes. I'm not going to open that up because it does take a little while to run, but it would allow us to take any existing notes that we had out there and convert them into the document attach utility. The other option that was system-wide is that we can now generate any document in Microsoft Word. So for instance, if I had a financial trial balance, and I'm just going to grab one here. This is looking at just cash accounts. I have the ability to email it, and you see up here under my file format, it's grayed out at the moment, but my file format can either be a docx file or HTML. If I choose my destination and I set that to template, and here we go. So here I have the destination. I set that to template, and I print that. It's opening up in a web browser, but you can see it does. It is going to come through as Word. Now if I go back to this under my email options, we'll save that. I'm not getting my docx to light up. I'll have to take a look at that, but that should come through as Microsoft Word. And I can assure you, this is one of those things that was working fantastically last night, but unfortunately, I needed to do a system restart today, and I'm not quite sure what happened there. But that should come through as Microsoft Word. Another feature that we had that's new in R2 is the ability of attaching SQL Reporting Services reports to anything on any transaction screens. So again, I'm going to pull up my invoice, and I have a new button up here for available reports, and I just assigned one, but I can go in and assign reports, and as long as you have SQL Reporting Services deployed on your system and the SSRS reports for GP deployed, it will come up with a list of reports that you can hook to this transaction screen. Again, any custom SQL report that I create will appear in this list as long as I have it stored out on my report server, and I can then hook that transaction or that document to this screen. In this case, I've just got sales document status, and that's going to open up in web browser. And this particular one doesn't have anything specific related to that invoice on it, but you can see it does launch that particular report in SQL Reporting. Those of you who aren't using SQL Reporting, that is definitely a tool that we should investigate. If you have any questions on that, you can give me a call. There is more and more of the out-of-the-box GP reports. Microsoft is slowly replacing those with the SQL Reporting reports, and they're making it easier to access all of those reports from within the GP interface. And this is just one more step in that direction. And then finally, last thing I wanted to take a look at was the ability of running your backups up to an Azure site. So I can pick my company, and I can pick my Dynamics database. In previous versions of GP, you only had the option of backing up your company database. Now I can back up the company database, or I can back up the Dynamics database, the system database. But in this case, I do not have an Azure account hooked up, but if I did, I could go ahead and select Azure Storage, point it to the key, and you receive a key and a URL to the container when you go out to Microsoft Azure and set up a storage site for that. Advantage to this is now as soon as I run a backup, it will be stored in the cloud. Don't have to worry about disk space, don't have to worry about it being deleted, and it'll be there until I delete it or I remove my Azure account. So with that, we're going to go back to the slides, and we're going to take a look at additions in R2 to the financials module. I say the financials, but it's going to include accounts receivable and accounts payable as well. Now, the first feature we're going to look at is one I should probably save for the very end, because if there's any particular reason to upgrade to R2, it would be the copy and paste function into the into the general ledger transaction screen. What this allows you to do is take data from an Excel spreadsheet and automatically paste it into the distribution lines of a journal entry in GP. The spreadsheet needs to be formatted in a certain order, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit, but it does allow you to copy from Excel, and as long as nothing is entered in the bottom part of the transaction entry screen, the paste button will be lit up in the top of the screen, and you'll be able to paste whatever you have copied directly into the transaction entry screen. You would still need to fill out the header portion of it, but that's relatively lightweight compared to keying a large journal entry that you probably already have stored somewhere in Excel. Another feature in the financial module is the ability of rolling down the account descriptions. In GP 2010, Microsoft added the ability to have the account description automatically generate based on the descriptions entered into the various segments. In the past, if you updated a segment, if a segment used to mean store 1 and now it means store 10, you would have to go through and change each one of your accounts that had that as part of the description. Now, Microsoft has added the ability of changing the segment and automatically rolling that down to all of the applicable accounts. Finally, another one of the big features is the ability to reverse a fiscal year-end close. This is essentially exactly what it says. If you happen to close a year and need to reopen it, you can go in and reverse the historical year and reopen that year. You can only reopen the most previous historical year. I can't go back and reopen a year from 5 years ago and process any transactions to that. If you did want to do that, you would need to back through and reopen all the prior years. It is a neat feature. We have had a few situations where people either accidentally closed a year or they wanted to reopen a year in order to process some additional transactions, even though GP does allow you to process transactions into the most current historical year. Before doing anything with the reversing historical years, it is highly recommended that you take a backup of your database prior to doing that. All users will need to be logged out of the system prior to reopening a fiscal year. Another feature that was added was the ability in BankRec to reprint an outstanding transactions report from a previously done bank reconciliation. This has been a common request over the years. The way to get it in the past was you had to make some modifications to the outstanding transactions report through Report Writer in order to do it, but they've now added that as a standard report option directly through GP. And then finally, for those of you using fixed assets, with GP 2013, they added the ability of defaulting the next asset ID from a system-wide standpoint. With 2013 R2, they've added the ability of defaulting that asset ID directly from the class. So if you wanted your various classes of assets to have different IDs, we can use the classes to generate that next ID. Another option that they've added, and this is just expanding on the email functionality that Microsoft continues to build into the system, is the ability of now selecting different email addresses based on the document type. Previously to R2, you had one email address that, in the case of sales order processing, that the orders and the invoices and the quotes and everything would go to. Well, it's often the case that you want those various pieces going to different people. And we now have the ability in 2013 R2 for picking different email addresses based on the document type. That is a feature that can be enabled or disabled at the customer level. So if you did have a customer that everything needs to go to one email address, you can always disable it, and then you don't have to fill in additional screens, or you can enable it and then pick the email address by document type. Another feature that was added in both receivables and in payables is in this particular example is going to be for the customer statements, is that we can email all of our statements and have the statements that didn't email automatically get printed out. Prior to R2, you either emailed everything or you could print everything, but you couldn't handle both options at one time. What they've added in several places in GP is the ability of both printing the document and sending the document in email and then printing the remaining statements or invoices that did not get emailed. So you can do all of it in one shot. Another option that they have added in for payables is defaulting the sort order for checks. Previously, the sort order was selected at the time that you were printing the checks, and if that was not changed at that time, checks would come out sometimes in order that you didn't expect. So now we can actually default that right on the payable setup screen so that it comes up like that whenever checks are printed. Another feature in payables is that they've expanded the document attach function. I know we've talked a lot about document attach, but they've expanded that to actually attach to accounts payable transaction entry as well. Previously, from a payable side, document attach function was only available on the purchase order side. And then another feature that they've added is just like in the sales order processing module, we now have the ability in payables of having the various documents go to different email addresses. So I can have the purchase order go to one spot, and I can have the vendor remittance sent to another email address. All right, so we're going to step back over into GP and take a look at a few of the features. Okay, first one we were looking at is the copy and paste function, and I like this one. I think it'll save a lot of people a lot of time. Typically, in general ledger transactions, if you weren't importing them using a tool like SmartConnect or something through Excel, you were in here hand keying them. If you had a large journal entry, oftentimes you could either copy an old one in and just change all the numbers, but most of the time people have those stored in Excel somehow. So what GP has done is we've added the paste function up here from Excel. In order for that to work, I'm going to open an Excel spreadsheet here. I need 4 columns in my spreadsheet. If I'm using analytical accounting, there's actually a feature there that we can include analytical accounting aliases down here, and it will also paste into analytical accounting. But for the most part, I just need 4 columns. They do need to be in this order, and I do always need 4 columns, even if I'm not using like a distribution reference. I still need to have the 4 columns. So if I have my distribution reference, my account, my debit, and my credit, I can highlight the data that I want to import, and I'm just going to copy that. And when I come into the transaction entry screen, I can click down here, hit paste, and it's automatically going to put my journal entry into GP. And you'll notice if I expand it out, I have my distribution reference lines in here as well. Now, during the paste process, GP is doing a validation on what you're pasting in there. So if I came in here and let's say that I had a typo on one of my accounts. So I just changed the one account, so I know that that's not valid. I'm going to copy it again. And if I paste that in here this time, I'm going to get a validation report. And if I bring that up to the screen, we can see that it's going to tell me that account number is not valid, does not exist. So I can come back in here, I can fix that, and we're going to copy this again, and I can put it directly into GP. This is a nice feature, though, for one-off journal entries. So the next feature that they added was the roll down of the account description. And if I go under Financial, under Setup to my segments, see, this is where I can pick a particular segment and I can give it a description. Now you see here I have, happens to be segment 1, and I've got a segment 1 of 999. And if I look at an account that I have in here where the 999 is the first segment, you see I just have it called HR blank blank. Not really sophisticated, and I'm sure my accounting manager would be mad at me for naming my accounts like that. But for demo, that's what we're going to do. So I can save that, and if I go back into my segment and I pull up 999, and I determine that that is now going to be corporate, I can hit save on here, and GP is going to ask me, do you want to roll that down? Well, yes, I do. So by doing that, if I now go into that account that I looked at before, it still says HR. Oh, it's because I had changed the segment ID before I rolled that down. So anyway, this should come through as corporate. I still want my segment to roll down, so I'm going to try it one more time, so bear with me. I'm going to just call it test this time, and yes, I want that to roll down. And so I'm going to find my account, and of course it did not update. One thing to note is that if the account description is not formatted with the dashes, it will not update. See, I have another 999 here, but this is one that was just manually keyed in. And so now, just to prove a point, I'm going to delete this account, and I'm going to re-add it, and you'll see how it pulls in test, because that's what I gave it in my segment. I'm going to save that. And now if I say that 999 is no longer test, but it is now corporate, I'm going to save that, roll it down. This is where we're going to say a little prayer, and look at that. It rolled it down. So I think it was because I had changed a couple of things outside of the system management, but it does roll down that change. For merging and combining GL accounts, the tool that you're still going to use is the Professional Services Tools library. It is a separate install. However, with, I believe it was GP 2010 Service Pack 2, the entire toolkit is now free to use for users of Dynamics GP. So the account combiner modifier is still a part of that, and it works pretty well. We have a lot of clients that use that on a regular basis. I would anticipate in the future that that tool is going to get rolled into the standard GP interface, much like they have done with the customer combiner and modifiers. We can see here in sales, and in purchasing they have the vendor combiner and modifier. They've moved those from the professional services tools into the GP interface. Next function we wanted to look at was reversing the fiscal year, and that's going to be up under financial and under routines, year-end close. And so at this point, you see now I'm in the sample company, so even though I have data all the way into 2017, the last year that has been closed was actually 2013. So I can come in and I'm going to reverse my historical year, and I can say, all right, I want to reopen 2013. I'm not going to process this because what it's actually going to do is move all of that data from the historical tables back into the open tables, and it's going to remove that balance brought forward entry that is created during a year-end close. So the end result is that year is now going to be completely available through my open years, and I'll be able to process transactions to it normally and then reclose it later. Again, GP does allow you to process transactions into a closed year. So where I could see this as being handy is if there were a substantial number of accounts that maybe were listed as profit and loss accounts instead of balance sheet, or vice versa. You could reopen that year and reprocess the year-end close properly. And again, the only transactions that it's going to remove are anything that were balance brought forward transactions. So if you did close the year, you process some transactions against the historical year. You know, everyone's familiar with the way GP works on a closed year. It automatically creates that closing entry for the new year. It would end up removing all of those as well. So next feature I wanted to look at was just reprinting the outstanding transactions report. And that's going to be under Financial Reports, and that's going to be under Bank Posting Journals. With R2, there is a new option down here for the Outstanding Transactions Report. And what this is going to look at, your only option, is by looking at Audit Trail Code. And this is only going to be for outstanding or bank reconciliations that have been processed in R2, because one of the functions in R2 is it is maintaining a historical copy of the outstanding transactions report. So unfortunately, which is different than the case with the year-end close, I would not be able to upgrade to R2 and reprint an outstanding transaction report. And so here's one, bank reconciliation that I just processed earlier, and if we print that, you can see right now there were the open items that I had on that bank transaction, or on that bank reconciliation. Okay, and then finally your next one is defaulting the asset ID. In the company setup for fixed assets with GP 2013, I did have the ability of setting GP to use the next asset ID. With 2013, on the class setup, I had the ability of saying default the asset ID from the class. So I've set it up so that with the auto class, it's going to come up with its own asset ID. So where that comes into play is if I set up a new fixed asset card, and I pick, I want this asset to be building, you see it defaults to what I have as the company asset ID. If I were going to create a new asset ID and pick auto, it's pulling from that particular class, because I've told it that I want that class to have a unique asset ID. Pretty simple, but I've seen where that can save some people some time. Finally, in sales order processing, I'm going to grab a customer, and if I go to the email options, this was the email based on document type. You can see I have that enabled for this particular customer. So now I can come in and say, all right, for the orders, and these are the different addresses that I have in there. For the orders, I only want that to come to me. But for the invoices, I want that to go to somebody else, but I want to be copied on it. So I can set email addresses how I see fit based on the document type here. Same thing applies in payables. If I go to the vendor card, and I'm going to use Ace Travel. I have the same thing here. I can enable or disable that, and I can have emails going to various email addresses based on whether it's a purchase order or the vendor remittance. Okay, defaulting the sort order on checks. That is a setup on payables. And I have the options right here to have the check sort by a preset value. Okay, document attach for the payables. Previously, prior to R2, I only have the document attach function on sales order processing or on purchase order processing, but now I do have the ability to include that on standard accounts payable transactions. So, okay. So the next block that I want to look at is with new features in the distribution series. Okay, so within distribution, they have added new enhancements around the suggested item functionality. The suggested items were added in GP 2013, but now they've added it so that you can, it'll analyze prior sales history and be able to recommend things that you want to suggest during the sales entry process. They've also added the ability to add a little sales script on there to help your salespeople while they're entering invoices. Another ability that they've added, I think that'll save a little bit of time, is the ability to assign items to multiple sites all at one time. Currently, through the item setup, you have to go through and add the sites individually, or there's another screen that you can go to that filters out, or you can give it a site range to assign to. Here you can just pull up the item site assignments and add it to the individual sites all in one shot. Another option that they have is with GP 2013, I believe it was, when they implemented the ability to do prepayments on purchase orders and then be able to cut a check against that prepayment. What they've added now in the payment inquiry screen is they've added the ability to drill back into the PO that the prepayment was attached to. And then finally, for those who are using the encumbrance module in GP, the encumbrance reports that were out of the box in GP previously tended to be a little slow and not give all the information that everybody needed. With 2013 R2, they have rolled all of those reports directly into SQL reporting. So now when you hit the print icon in GP, it'll automatically launch the SQL reporting reports. And I think that's the process that GP or Microsoft is going to be taking with future reports as well. So for the suggested items on inventory, I can come in, I'm just going to grab an item, grab the processor, and I have the ability of coming down to suggest items. And right now I have one item in there that if I were to add this to an invoice, this would automatically pop up. And you see I have a little sales script that says this item goes well with my multi-core processor, presumably. But what I can also do is I can have it analyze. And I can say, all right, look at all of my sales orders. I'm going to tell it, since I'm in the test company, I'm going to tell it 2017. And I want to calculate and go back and look at all of my invoices and tell me what people buy in addition to that processor. And it came back with 4 different items. And based on previous sales history, I can see that, well, typically when I sell a processor, I'm selling 2 sticks of RAM or an additional 333 processor. So I can say, all right, I want all of these on my suggested items. So I'll just put these on there, give an order. I'm going to save that. And so now I have 4 different suggested items. And I can put an extra little script on here. This item is good too, and so on. So if I hit OK and I save that, now when I go to do a sales order, and I'm going to pick good old Aaron Fitz, and if I pick that first item that we have, and you'll see automatically I'm going to get a suggested items up here. And you see I click on this one, my script says this item goes well, that item is good too, so on. And I didn't put anything in for those 2s. But I can automatically click my selected items and hit OK, and it's going to automatically add those items to my sales invoice for me. Okay. Next is the prepayment Additions. I did have a purchase order. For those of you who have not seen the prepayment functionality in GP, I can do a prepayment right here. And then when I build a check batch, I can tell it to select any prepayments that are on purchase orders. For the purpose of this example, I had a purchase order that I processed a prepayment on. So here's a purchase order, and I did a $1,000 prepayment on it. And I can get back to that now if I did a transaction by vendor. I know that was for a travel company, and it was this guy right here. And if I drill back into that payment, you can see what they've added now is the ability to drill directly back into that purchase order that prepayment is tied to. The next feature that we had talked about were the Encumbrance SQL Reporting Services reports. I don't have any encumbrance data installed, so that report would just come up blank. So I'm actually not going to run that one. Take my word for it, it does look very nice. So a couple of the other features that they've rolled into 2013 R2 all revolve around the employee self-service. Previously, there was the employee self-service suite that was out on Business Portal. And that Business Portal had a whole other set of hardware that was associated with it. You had to install SharePoint, you had your own SharePoint site, and everything else for people to log into. With GP 2013 R2, or with 2013, they are discontinuing Business Portal, and they are moving that employee self-service functionality into the GP application itself. And so all of the functionality that was in Business Portal is now going to be in GP. They have all the screens in there set up to handle all of the payroll on behalf of, all of the time card entry, and all of the stuff that was in Business Portal is now located directly in GP. So they have a time card entry screen that employees can go in and key their time into. There's a new workflow engine that is in GP that would now allow them to submit that time card for approval and let it route through its process. As well as on the home page, they've added new parts in the home page which will allow you to view your time cards, approve time cards that are assigned to you, and so on. The current functionality of the Employee Self-Service Suite is that employees would need to be logged in to GP in order to enter their time. Now, employees would need to be set up as limited users in GP, and they would most likely access it if you were using this module through an install of the web client, because obviously we don't want to install GP on everybody's workstation. But for right now, with the initial release of 2013 R2, employees would have to log in to GP either through the web client or through the desktop client and do their time entry and have access to pay stubs and the related items. One of the items that's coming up, and it's supposed to be out later this year, is Microsoft is releasing apps to replace a lot of the web functionality that was in Business Portal. So right now the apps that are scheduled for release are a procurement app as well as a time management app that people would be able to enter their time, view their time cards and whatnot through an app on their phone or through other means. So they have added the ability to have that home page. Again, users would have to log into GP. It would use a limited user license, not a full GP user. Another function that Microsoft has added into GP 2013 is a new workflow tool. Out of the box in 2013, that workflow tool is enabled for purchase order approvals, purchase requisitions, project timesheets, and any payroll time card approvals that are needed. You can set up your own workflow rules within GP. If we look at setup, workflow, so here's where I can set up new workflows. Here's a sample workflow, and I can add additional steps to it. I can have, if I have email enabled in here, I can have the various steps go through emails. And again, this is the precursor to when Microsoft releases the apps related to workflow and to requisitioning, that once you have that app, most time card entry, requisition approval, requisition routing can all be done through the individual apps. Microsoft has said fall 2014 is when many of those apps are going to be released. I'm expecting those to probably come out in the fourth quarter. I guess that hits the main points I wanted to look at. I had a couple of things I wanted to look at with the release of GP 2015. Obviously, Microsoft is going to be further expanding on the items that they built out with R2. There's going to be additional workflows that they're going to enable. Currently, there's only the 4, but you can see from the list here that they are going to expand the workflow capabilities into all parts of the system. And also, there's a requisitioning process that they have put into GP. You can see, in addition to purchase orders now, I have a purchase requisition, and here's a requisition for office supplies that we had on here. So I can fill out a requisition, and I could submit that into a workflow as long as I had a workflow attached to it, and it would then flow through the process. And then at some point when it's fully approved, I can hit purchase, and it's going to transfer that requisition into a purchase order. And all of those steps would leave an audit trail. Okay, we talked about the business portal replacement. They're going to have an app that they want to release for the procurement. It's going to have very much a Windows 8 design, following the tile layout that they've been going with. Again, they're going to have an app for the time management system, so that people wouldn't necessarily have to log in to GP in order to do that. So with that, thank you for attending. If you guys have any questions, my email address and phone number are on the screen. Feel free to shoot me an email. We'll get back to you on an answer. Thank you very much for attending.